Thank you, Anna. Hi, everybody. Welcome to our webinar, Resources for Gerontological and Social Science Researchers from the National Archive of Computerized Data on Aging, also known as NACDA. I am Catherine Lavender, and as Anna said, I am the Data Project Manager at NACDA. There we go. Okay, so today we're going to talk a little bit about NACDA, about some of our popular studies and how you might access the data from those studies, how you might deposit your own data, some tools and resources that we have independent of the other things that I mentioned, and we'll give you the opportunity to ask some questions. Okay, so we are part of ICPSR, and if you don't know what ICPSR is, it's the largest social science data archive. We've been around for more than 50 years, and NACDA is the aging archive within ICPSR. We began as a research concept in the late 70s, and we've been around for about 35 years as of this year. Back in the 90s, when ICPSR first started offering data sets on the internet, we had less than 30, and today we have over 13,000 data sets. We are funded by the National Institute on Aging, and we acquire and preserve data relevant to gerontological research. We are part of a collaborative agreement with NIA, and we have a steering committee that helps us assess our goals and discuss progress, and they provide us feedback, and they discuss with us the needs of the gerontological research community. And as you can see, these are a list of our experts that serve on our committee, and some of them are also PIs to some of the studies that we house. As I mentioned, we are part of ICPSR, so if you were on the ICPSR homepage and you were to scroll down, you would see all the wonderful archives that comprise ICPSR. And we would be represented by our logo, NACDA Program on Aging, and if you were to go there, it leads you to our site. So this is our front page. Basically, you know, if you get here and you wonder, where do I start? Do you have a research topic in mind? If you do, you could start with searching. Do you already know what kind of data set you need? You would also start with searching with that. If you have no idea what we do and you want a quick explanation, there is a 2-minute video right there in the middle. It says NACDA Overview, and that's a good place to start if you're just kind of not sure, even after this webinar, what we do. Hopefully that won't be the case. So we preserve and share data for secondary analysis. So some popular studies we share are Midas, the Midlife in the United States study, the National Social Life Health and Aging Project, also known as NSHAP, SWAN, the study of women's health across the nation, TILDA, oh, not that TILDA, the Irish Longitudinal Study on Aging. I'm going to tell you a little bit more about a couple of these popular studies, and then I'll leave the other ones for you to research on your own. So the Midlife in the United States study has psychological factors in their data, personality traits, well-being, positive and negative effect, sense of control, all kinds of things combined with a plethora of demographic variables and relationship variables. Whenever anybody has questions about data that they might want to use, I refer them to Midas because it really has a little bit of everything in their data. And I stole a little screenshot from their website. On their website, they have this photo reel, and you know, basically they're about improving the understanding of how Americans age. And it's done within the University of Wisconsin-Madison at the Institute on Aging. We have about 25 studies in our Midas series. And I think that's all of the Midas data, and most of it's public use. There is a Japanese sample called MIDJA. It's longitudinal, and there's the Midas 1, Midas 2, Midas 3 samples, and those can all be, you know, merged using the ID variables. And then there's the refresher sample, and that's a new cohort, and that cannot be merged with the other samples. So, and we also have some restricted data from Midas, which is the African American sample from Milwaukee. Another popular study we have is also another US national study called NSHAP, as I mentioned, the National Social Life Health and Aging Project. And this is done at NORC at the University of Chicago, and it integrates physical, psychological, sensory, functional, cognitive, and social dimensions. Oops, sorry about that. So my director likes to say that this is one of the few studies on aging adults that actually treats them like adults. And it has mixed public and restricted use data in its 3 ways. So how might you access these data? Well, you would start from our search page. And if you go to our search page, you'll see that there's some tips on how to search effectively. This basically drills down to, do you need to use quotation marks? The answer is yes, if you're going to use multiple words within a search term. If you just are searching by one word, you don't need the quotation marks. We have a prominent search box that appears at the right-hand corner of every page on our site. We also have some quick links like most downloaded studies that you might be interested in. One of my favorite ways to search is by variable. So you can see a recording where I type in cognition, I hit search and I click on the variables tab. This is how you would search by variable, and you can see the variable name, the variable label, and which study it's from, and kind of a little bit more about the variable, like if it's numeric or if it's something else. And you can click on the variable and it will lead you to an unweighted frequencies display. And then there's also a link to the study from that display. We also have a variable comparison tool. So if you were searching across variables from the search page, you could also select variables that you're interested in and compare them top to bottom. So you can see this example is from the Hispanic Peas study between 2006 and 2009, and it's about doing work around the house. And you can compare them right from the search page. So when you get to a place where you're looking at a study that you've selected and you want to learn more about it, you would click on the search result, whether that's from the study search or whether it's you've gotten there from a variable page. And what you land on are study pages. And this is where you would find out everything you need to know about the study before you want to download it. And I like to highlight the At a Glance tab because this is where all the descriptive information is. And you want to make sure that you scroll down. When you scroll down, you'll see that there are different accordion menus to click on and expand. And I think that these are really underutilized. This is where you might see important notes about the collection, dates, a bit of methodology information. This is where you would also find out about versioning and whether there was a recent update and why. It has some broad level details on the reason for the updates. And then lastly, there's the analysis information. And this is where you would find a bit of info about the weights that are in the data. So study pages also, this is where you'd also download whole files. And there's a couple different ways to download from the study pages. The main download button in the left-hand side of the page above the data and documentation tab, that's where you would download a lot of files at once. For instance, all of the SPSS files together. The data and documentation tab is where you might find features for just downloading by a data set or by a file set. So as you can see, like there's dataset 0 study level files. Whenever you see that, those are files that have to do with the whole collection and not just a data set. And then we've got dataset 1 main siblings and twin data, and that's where if you're like, I just want dataset 1, that's where you would go to preview documentation or download data and documentation. So if I were going to click on that download button by dataset 1, I can see that there's the whole list of files available for dataset 1, including a code book, all the way to the preservation flat ASCII formats of the data and the syntax files. Once you've gotten to making your decision to download, you do need to register. So everything I just showed you, you can do without registering. You can look at our site at any time, find any variables from that variable display, but when you want to download files, you'll have to register. We collect very little information, just your name and your email and your institution. We don't do anything with it, like sell it or spam you. We do use it to track usage so that our funders and the PIs can see the research potential of any given study. And if there's a major update and the PI asks us to email users of those data, we might email you and let you know, hey, that downloaded has been updated. Once you've downloaded, you'll get a zip package. And you might wonder, why is it in the zip package? And this can be frustrating, but I assure you it's for good reasons. Our internal infrastructure needs to be able to support single data set studies and multiple data set studies. Also, if you were to download just a data file, you might be downloading a lot of data files and forget what that one's about. And so we want any data file to have the accompanying metadata and documentation so that users can understand and remember what it is they've downloaded. Most of our data is public use. We're federally funded by NIA, and that means that we want to make sure that the data are completely open and free to the public. When you're looking for public use data, if you look on the left-hand side of the screen, you'll see that we have these filters set up. They're always there. If you just wanted to see how much public use data we have, you'd go to the restriction type, and you can see that there's a hyperlink for public use data. If you were interested in just seeing how much restricted use data we have, on the right-hand side of the screen, you see that we have a quick link for all restricted use data. So public use data is immediately available for download from our site. Restricted data is not immediately available for download. Restricted data sometimes contain sensitive information or may focus on a specific population and require additional care in order to ensure that they'll be used for ethical research purposes. So let's say you're interested in downloading some of our popular restricted data collections, like the restricted version of NSHAP or the Midas Milwaukee sample, or the National Long-Term Care Survey. We have a page on our site called Accessing Restricted Data, and there you'll find the general steps, but maybe you don't want to read all that, maybe you just want to watch another short video. We have a video up there for that, and it's about 2 minutes. It's a pretty straightforward process, but also I encourage you to look at the study pages for the restricted data. Often there are public use versions and restricted versions of restricted data, and the study pages might alert you to documentation that's available to understand the difference between the public and restricted versions. For instance, this NSHAP example, we created a comparison Excel sheet that's right there for you to check out and understand the difference in the variables between the public and restricted use files. So maybe you've used some of our data for secondary search, but maybe you've also collected your own primary data. You might want to think about depositing with us at ICPSR and NACDA. It helps you to fulfill grant obligations. Helps with data management plan obligations. It helps other people in the research community understand the potential of the data. It's free. We preserve it long term, and we track usage. So if you are interested in depositing data, you would go to our homepage and you can see that there's a deposit data tab, and we have lots of tools to help you understand what this means. We have a depositor agreement, depositor checklist, acquisitions policy, and some FAQs. But basically, this slide lays out the main things that you need. You need a title. We need to know the PI. We need to have a good description of the files and the supporting documentation. But if you get there and you're just like, I want someone to explain it to me, you can always email us directly at this NACDA email, and we'll help you figure it out. And You know, this is the value of public use data. We couldn't have secondary access or analysis without a place to store and share everything first. So it all starts with sharing data. We have two options for depositing. The main archive, which is curated, and a lot of people wonder, what does this mean? It basically means that we do everything that we need to do to make it so you can just download the data with that download button, but that it's available to you in any kind of file format that you might need, whether you're an SPSS user, a SAS user, or an R user. We did that. And we're aware of the eccentricities between the different statistical packages. And so we take care of those kinds of things so that you don't have to worry about it. We also have a new open archive for NACDA, and it's a self-published version. And I'm going to talk a little bit about why you might want to use that version. So the Open Aging repository for NACDA, it basically provides a lot of the same benefits as depositing to the main archive, except that it's self-published. So you're fulfilling your NIH data sharing requirements, and there's a very quick turnaround for making the data available and getting your DOI. We support NIA-funded data, but we also want to acquire any data about gerontological research. And so this is also a way for us to make sure that data on aging has a place to go and it's all discoverable through the same resource. Another thing that you might want to consider, so say you collected your data, or you work for a research team where you've collected data and you know you're going to disseminate it yourself, but you want to get the word out. Well, we help make aging data on aging discoverable. And so there is an option to create a metadata page, just like a study page, where we point to your resource, your site, but we've added search terms and we have provided collection level metadata for users so that they can find your study through us. So say you've given us your data and you want to know, is it being used? Well, I use NSHAP as an example, and right on the study page, you can see that there are over 7,000 downloads for this study. And if you click on usage report, you'll be able to see more detailed information about the users, maybe how, over time, different periods of time, how often it's been downloaded, whether just data was downloaded, whether just documentation. You can find out more about the amount of users from different member institutions and whether those users are graduate students or faculty. It's a pretty good report. So another way that we like to showcase use, but also help the research community understand the potential of different data sets are through related publications. Related publications, they're basically our way of confirming that people who've written about data that they've used that we have on our site, it's our way of ensuring that that they're linked to that study. So we confirm that that researcher has used the data, and then we provide the citation. So you can see that this example is taken from Midas, I believe, and it has over 1,400 related publications associated with that series of data. We have really easy tools to, for you to send us your citations if you've used our data, and this is for all of ICPSR. There's a form on our site, and the links here, I'll share these slides after, and you'll be able to access the resources I'm talking about through these links. Another tool that we provide is the CollectAgha portal. And CollectAgha is based in DDI, the Data Documentation Initiative, and it's a valuable tool for longitudinal and repeat measure data. And so ICPSR and NACDA within ICPSR, I think that we do a really beautiful job of providing the complete picture of a data set. So our job is to preserve it such that if the researcher no longer can put any effort in on those data, maybe they're not available to answer questions, we've gone through and tried to answer those questions before we released it so that users have everything they need. Well, the CollectAgha portal, it's kind of a step beyond that. So instead of downloading whole data files, the CollectAgha portal makes it so that you can download custom data extracts and browse variables across waves side by side. So what you're seeing here is the NSHAP data, and it has 3 waves, and this is the public use data and just the core data. And what you're seeing are on the left-hand side are social networks and social support concepts. And within that concept are these marital status variables. And so if you're, looking to do research on marriages and you're like, I want to use NSHAP, but I need to know that all 3 waves have these variables. This would be a quick way for you to find that out. And then you can click on the variables and see the frequencies side by side. And if you decide you want to download something, you can take just those variables you're interested in and select them and add them to a basket. And then it allows you to download a CSV file, an SPSS file, a PDF codebook, or DDI file. And what you'll get are just the variables you chose, along with any important weights or ID variables that we have pre-identified to accompany any file. So CollectAgha has a couple NIA-funded longitudinal data resources. Midas has a CollectAgha portal, NHATS has a CollectAgha portal, and NSHAP, we have their CollectAgha portal. And we are working on identifying and mapping out overlapping concepts and variables between NSHAP and NHATS, and hope to debut that work in the CollectAgha portal sometime next year. You do need to register separately for the CollectAgha portal. It's different from your My Data account, but that's a small price to pay for finding variables easily across waves. So part of our mission is to help data users understand the research potential of our secondary data resources so that they can go and affect policy and better their communities for aging populations. This is one example where we scraped our resources and put them all in one place to make it easier for users to find what they need. So this population health models project, we went through our studies and we named them as data resources, but we also went through different external resources and we put all the links right here in one place so that we could highlight these and just make it easier for our users. We love longitudinal data, and we have some great resources on our site, and this chart shows some of those great resources, some of those studies. These are also some of our most downloaded studies. And what we've done is we've put them in this chart and added a bit of metadata information about them. And then we took some concepts and we searched through their variables to confirm whether or not these studies have variables within those concepts. And if you go to this from our website, those are hyperlinks for those study acronyms, and they'll take you right to the study pages so that you can learn more about them. Aside from making all this wonderful data available, we also do outreach. We do conferences, we have social media, we put up announcements on our site and have a quarterly newsletter, and we provide user support. If you're interested in subscribing to our announcements, you can find that on the front page. There's that subscribe to news button, and you can see the different kinds of announcements that we post. So say you've used our data and you have a question about it, or maybe you haven't used our data and you're searching through the site and you have a question about that. Or maybe you've also used our data and you found an error. Reach out to us. We have ICPSR user support, and we also have this direct NACDA email, and we are happy to help you figure things out. So some upcoming gerontological research related workshops and conferences. We've got the Midas Gene Expression Workshop that's coming up. You want to apply by March 1st. We've got the AGEN conference, which I think is the only Japanese conference on aging. And we've got the Population Association of America conference that we'll be exhibiting at in April, and that's in DC. We have our site, Twitter, Facebook, LinkedIn, And there's that email again. So there's lots of ways to reach out to us. If you are working on data on aging, we want to know about it. You know, if you think that there's more waves of a certain collection that we should have that we don't have, you know, let us know. And now I'm going to open it up for questions. As I mentioned, these slides are going to be available after this webinar. And thank you so much, everybody, for listening. And what kind of questions do you have? I feel like I went through a lot. Check out what we've got here. Okay, so it looks like somebody asked about how are the data validated? And so, well, we're funded by National Institute on Aging. And because we're federally funded, we get a lot of data that's, you know, encouraged to come to us through our funder. A lot of people write us into their data management plans. And so because NIA is supporting them, we consider that a strong validation statement. You know, NIA is supporting that research to be done, and they're expecting progress on those things, and then those researchers get that done and they give us their data. So we're not too concerned about if data is fabricated and then given to us, because most of our researchers are NIA resources. What other questions do you have? Okay, so somebody said, kudos for understanding that there are eccentricities with statistical packages. Hang on one second, I'm having an issue with my webinar screen. I'm just going to exit out of the webinar and see if that will help with the control panel real quick. Okay. Anna, are you listening? I'm having a hard time seeing the questions that are coming in.
I am here. I can go ahead and read those questions to you. And FYI, we are still seeing your screen share if you wanted to stop your screen share or go back to your PowerPoint.
Okay.
So, great. So one question that came in is asking to please share a little bit more about how to get access to the restricted data.
Okay, great. Thank you so much for reading that. So our restricted data within NACDA is mostly for additional tracking purposes. As I mentioned, that they have sensitive populations or variables that mean that we need to ensure ethical research purposes when they're used. And so I'll use a couple different examples. For the Midas Milwaukee data, all that's required is for the user to fill out a data use agreement. And this agreement is an additional step. It's an additional form you download from the study page, and you fill it out. And basically what you're agreeing to is to further agree, because ICPSR asks you to agree to this in our terms of use when you download, but you're furthering agreeing not to disseminate the data on your own. You're basically stating that you're not going to use it for anything other than ethical research purposes. And then there's some additional, making sure the data are kept safe. And so you fill out this form and you send it to us via email, and you sign it, and basically we review it and we approve it if everything looks good. And then through email, we will send you an encrypted link where you can obtain the files, and it's password protected. So it's this multiple step process where we email you the encrypted link, and then you let us know that you got the link, and then we give you the password, and then you can download the file and get the password so that you can actually open the files. So that's one example. NSHAP, it requires getting an IRB from your institution. And so there's an additional step with that. There's a form just like what I described with the Midas Milwaukee data, but with that form you have to send your own written data protection plan, and that's your statement of how you're going to keep the data safe. That a lot of people see the agreement and feel overwhelmed, and they just want kind of somebody to explain it to them, and that makes perfect sense because the rest of the data is just right there to download. So yeah, with restricted data it seems a little heavier, but for us it's not too bad. I hope that answers the question.
Yeah, that was great. Thank you. Okay, the next question that came in is there a way to filter data sets for oversamples of specific subpopulation, e.g. Asian Americans or African Americans?
So at this time, the filters that you see on the site are what we have available, and we currently do not have a filter for like the methodology information such as the universe or the sample field. That's how we would create a filter for that, is through those metadata fields. And those fields right now are open-ended text fields. And so until a language is defined for those fields, we really can't make a filter for it. But if you were to search for, in quotation marks, African Americans, or if you were to search for, in quotation marks, Asian aging or something to that effect, like when you're using the multiple terms in one search, you want to use the quotation marks around them. And I feel like you can do a more advanced search, but you kind of have to start with what's most important and then drill down through them. So, and what you're getting is you're getting a visual from the study level and not the data set level. So that's an additional thing you have to keep in mind. That's why I like searching by variable best, because the variable kind of gives you a glimpse into the world of that data set. And when you click, and so if you're searching for African Americans, then you go into variables and you can read through the variable level metadata and say, hey, this kind of looks like what I'm looking for, and then go to that study page from there. And you can also search within a single study, the variables within that study. There's a variables tab on each and every study page. So I hope that helps. But yeah, I mean, we don't have like an official filter for universe or sample right now.
Great, thank you so much. Last question that we have so far, and if anybody else wants to add in additional questions, please do. Can a doctoral student use as a data resource preserver for a dissertation?
So you can use secondary data resources in your dissertation, and I would speak to your advisor about that. We make the DOIs available, so you can cite us, and we make that easy to do by making those DOIs right there available on the study pages. So it's very easy to link the secondary data you might use and cite it in your paper. I think maybe that's what you're asking, but I'm not sure. But yeah, I mean, one of the reasons that we exist is because there are students, whether they're graduate students or undergraduate students, who need access to data, and they don't have the resources to collect it themselves. And so what you can do is you can, pick a topic, and what's really popular right now that people are very interested in is this idea of looking across different studies and even different samples and seeing what trends different populations have in common. It's crosswalks, cross concepts. And so yeah, essentially you could do that. But even within a series, say you don't want to look at a bunch of different studies, you can look at many different data sets within the same series. So it's the same population, or maybe the same questions being asked across different respondents, but the same representative sample over time. And I think that would still be effective for what you need.
Great, thank you. And we should mention that you're welcome to clarify your questions by typing those into the questions box. And you can also always message us afterwards If you have further clarifying questions, we'd be happy to ask that. Okay, great. So a new question related to that one. If I have secondary data, but do I need to identify how I will preserve they need me to identify how I will preserve the data set. Can I use that?
Interesting. So I'm sorry, can you repeat the first part of the question?
Yes, of course. So the full question says, if I have secondary data, but they need me to identify how I will preserve the data set, can I use that?
Oh, yes. So you can include us in your plan for data preservation in your data management plan. And I would recommend that you reach out to us and, we talk about your data and what you have that you need to preserve. But yes, whether it's primary data that you need to preserve so that it can be used for secondary data, or whether it's like kind of a replication data set that you did, we can help with both of those options.
Great, thank you. Next question. Does your study data repository encompass studies with clinical foci?
So because we're a social science data archive, it's taken a long time to get data resources that cross both the social sciences and more of the, the clinical data, or more, biological data. And so we have some studies that incorporate clinical variables, but they're nested in these social frameworks. And so NSHAP is really good for this. They do a lot of measures with the body. As far as like studies that have maybe nurses or doctors completing the information, I can think of a series that we have, and it's I think it's the National, I want to say, Hospice Care Survey. It's a little bit older, but I think it has a lot of those variables.
Great, thank you so much. And the next question says, I'm sorry, I missed the beginning. Did you say it's possible to compare variables?
Yes, I did. Let me see if I can go to that slide. So we have a couple different ways. It depends on which data set you're going to use. But if you were going to use something like NSHAP, NSHAP is in this CollectAgha portal, and we have that's one area you can compare variables for NSHAP. NSHAP is all we have in this portal right now, so that's why I'm bringing it up. But from the ICPSR study page, we have a comparison tool, and I'm going to it in the slides. Sorry, takes me just a second. So if you're on our search page and you type in a term, like I'll just use the previous question sample, like clinical, like say you're looking for something like that. I don't recommend that because that's vague, but maybe you're looking for BMI or something like that. And you type that in, then you see the results come up, and by default, the results that come up are going to be study results. But there's another tab and it says variables. There's also a tab for related publications, and you can search through any of those means. So if you click on the variables tab, and then you'll see a list of variables across many different studies. There should be checkboxes by them, and then there should be a little icon that says compare. And so you can check on the variables that you're interested in, and then click compare, and then it will lead you to a page that kind of looks like the screen that I have up right now, where you would see the variable name, and then the variable label, and then the unweighted value, the unweighted frequencies and values. So like this example is from Hispanic Appease, and you can see that there are two different data sets, two different time points. And so, but they're measuring the same thing.
Okay, great. So, that looks like that is the end of the questions that we currently have.
Okay, great. Thanks so much, Anna.
Of course.
All right, thank you so much to everybody for attending this webinar and for your interest in NACDA. And again, I'll make the slides available through a link on our announcements page, but also I'll share them to your emails. And we really appreciate you listening to our spiel today. And hopefully you find some data that you need.